Saddle up, because this chapter review is going to focus on one thing and one thing mainly: the story progression. The story progression components are like the vast majority of the chapter, and then the rest of it is relatively simple, straightforward. So if you don't know, now you know. You can check out my full live stream reaction to this chapter on my Requiem channel, and of course on my Twitch channel, all links in the box below. Numero uno. Numero dos, if you want to see my One Piece episode live reactions, first on Patreon, but then later on uploaded and edited on my Kingu-san channel, link in the box below to that channel as well. So that being said, as per usual, for this chapter One Piece, we're gonna go step by step and piece by piece, first and foremost with the pacing and the chapter structure, number one. Number two, of course, is going to be the character components of the chapter. And number three, finally, is going to be the story progression components of this chapter. And before we get started, we have to have a brief word for today's sponsor. And of course, today's sponsor is none other than the Surfshark VPN.
Lovely.
So I'm willing to guess that most of you lads and ladies watching this video are weebs.
Correct, sir.
It is what it is. We are who we are, our chest held high, and we show the world unabashedly our appreciation of the culture of the land of the rising sun. But in doing so, sometimes we do venture into very dark and dangerous places where individuals that mean us no good, for damn sure, they are going to try and ruin our days, our weeks, our months, especially if it's crypto related. Woo!
My God.
Woo! So if you wind up in these dark and dangerous places, whether they be rated M for mature or not, it's up to you. But the fact of the matter is that you're gonna want some protection when you do go to these places, and Surfshark VPN has your back. Not only does it have some damn good features, like the clean web feature that removes any ads, malware, or trackers is gonna be there to ruin your day. And even though I love cookies, the fact of the matter is that I hate them online, but Surfshark VPN can easily handle cookies, making my online experience all the more better. Surfshark VPN is quite literally available on all your devices, and also quite literally available all around the world. And one last thing too, if you don't know, now you know, a lot of my content is region gated.
Nani?
But you can easily gain access to mine and other region-gated content easily with Surfshark VPN by simply changing the region where you're located in, and then boom, just like that, you'll gain access to all those features that previously you could not gain access to. So go in the description box down below, use code KOL, that is KOL, to get a Black Friday deal special for this month of November to get not only 3 months free, but also 85% off of your purchase of Surfshark VPN. Once again, 85% off. So on that note, thank you Surfshark VPN for being awesome. Once again, use code KOL, KOL, and now let's get back to the video at hand. So first and foremost, for the pacing and the chapter structure, there are a total of 6 parts for this chapter. So number one, we start off first in the Fabrio phase scrap heap area with one jump in time with Luffy and company. Number two is going to be the Labo phase area with the other Straw Hats. Number three is going to be the Fabrio phase again. Number 4 is going to be the seawaters close to Egghead Island on the Royal Government ship. Number 5 is going to be back to the Labo phase. And then number 6 is going to be Kamabaka. We do jump around quite a bit, where again, we want to see what's going on with Luffy and company. Then we have what's going on with the Straw Hats. And then we have what's going on with Rob Gucci, and Kaku and Stussy. They have to go back to Labo phase. So we do jump around a lot in this chapter. And I'll say overall, the relative structure is simple. There is, again, that one time leap forward. The overall pace and structure of this chapter is okay. 4 to 6 parts for Oda is more on the norm for Oda's pacing. But if we go past 8 parts, okay, now we're just like, here we go. So for this chapter, again, pacing overall, okay. Now the character section of this video. The prima character, of course, Dr. Vegapunk. Vegapunk ate the brain braid fruit. He is a brain human. I believe the Japanese is like a tongue twister. The Nobi Nobi no Mi Nobi Ningen, something of that sort. I'm not too sure. I'm not Japanese, so you guys let me know in the comment section down below about that whole tongue twister thing. But the Nobi Nobi no Mi, he's actually not a Hito. He's not a human. His brain gets big as a human, but let's say if a dog or let's say another animal consume that ability, then their brains also get massive as a result. And it seems for the most part that the main function here is to gain extraordinary memory capacity. So it doesn't necessarily make someone smarter per se, but at the very least, in the case of let's say Vegapunk, they can store knowledge of all things without limits, and their brain grows bigger given the amount of data that they are storing with their ability. This explains clearly how he can memorize all of the books in the, let's say, revitalized Library of Ohara. That's not his own genius per se to memorize all those books. That's actually the ability of the Nobi Nobi no Mi. So it's kind of clear here that he is a genius, true, but he has cheat codes. He has dev accesses that clearly other geniuses, other players aren't working with. And even though his brain right now is detached from his own body, his brain is still growing because he himself isn't dead. He's sharing brain wave links despite the lack of physical body. Could you imagine, let's say, a random zombie walking into that Punk Records and seeing like a massive brain? It'd be like a Scrooge McDuck. They would just dive in there and just swim and have a good time. The same way Scrooge McDuck treated gold is the same way that zombie would treat that gigantic brain. But Vegapunk also has these grand ideas of folks sharing the same brain library of knowledge that he has, the Punk Records. And then in this theoretical world, anyone who is connected to Punk Records could update Punk Records, make the brain even bigger, and ultimately create a gigantic sea of knowledge. Kind of feels like a hive mind of sorts, at least just for knowledge, but nonetheless a sort of hive mind, like some Independence Day action with the aliens. And Jinbei makes a very sound point about how there'll be some major clashes of ideology when it comes to everyone sharing the same brain, but Vegapunk is clearly a guy that's like, break things as you move. It doesn't necessarily matter in, like, let's say the grand scheme of things if folks clash, as long as science just simply moves forward. And then finally, on Vegapunk's note, he is a massive perfectionist. And many folks did call this because Momo's abilities were like spot on to Kaido's, outside of one difference. He is a pink dragon, not a blue dragon. And Vegapunk deems that to be an absolute failure. After that for character is Vegapunk 01 Shock of the Good. Simply put, he seems to be the de facto leader of the other Vegapunks 2 through 6. We got some sense of that when he was the one talking to Dragon in chapter 1064, and he stopped the fighting in the next chapter 1065. But in this chapter, Pythagoras comes running in straight to Shaka, telling Shaka that CP0 is here, and then Shaka makes the call to completely refuse CP0 and also prepare for battle. So Shaka is like the genuine de facto leader of the other Vegapunks. Next for character, low-key, is Bonnie. And Bonnie, we find out, has a fear of bugs. And I can't blame her, because a gigantic horde of bugs coming your way, that is a scary thing. I think most folks buckle. I think the vast majority of humans buckle in a sea of bugs. And then finally for character, low-key, is Hattori, Rob Gucci's pigeon. Or I stated before, that these CP0 agents that wear masks are, for the most part, built different. They are a cut above the rest. And Hattori, the pigeon, is wearing a mask. Officially, Hattori is an elite agent. And that is it for character for this chapter. And now finally, the story progression components for this chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, we start off in a very fantastic way. Judge, Caesar Clown facing off. This, of course, refers back to the good old days of Mads, where we know back in the past that Vince Smoke Judge, Caesar Clown, Queen the Plague, and of course Vegapunk were all working together in a group called MADS before they were captured by the world government. We know that Judge escaped, and it appears that Caesar Clown and Vegapunk did not escape. We see Judge and we see Caesar Clown face to face, seemingly not just in a heated argument, but potentially going to fight each other. This is the scientific rivalry between those four scientists. Recall this, in chapter 1023, after Queen asked Sanji if he was a Lunarian, while Queen is blocking Sanji's attack, he states, and I quote, "Let me show you the power of a cyborg even Vegapunk can't create, kid." And as I've said before, even though Vegapunk is like the de facto best scientist without a damn doubt, it does appear that each of these scientists, including Vegapunk, have their own field of specialty. Queen, in his own way, competed with Judge by remaking all of the Germa abilities, the stealth, the lasers, the lighting, and so on and so forth. And then he stated and kind of proved that he is a quality of cyborg that Vegapunk hasn't shown just yet. And then we see the cover story, Caesar Clown and Judge, they face each other, and so it kind of cascades from there. So once after all that, we find out that Vegapunk does have cheat codes. He has the brain fruit, which allows him to essentially store all data and all intel that he has consumed, which explains why he can memorize the entire library of Ohara, the revitalized version of it. And of course, his brain is continuing to expand and grow in the Punk record. So now we know that the Punk records, like the top hangar bay of the island, is where his brain is. Now, very important here, I suppose, we don't know if his brain is actually like as large as that whole section. It could be. It's possible, but damn, if it is, wow, that's a lot of knowledge, a lot of data that he stored, and apparently the Apple antenna that he has coming over his head allows him to sync up with Punk records on a regular basis, which is why he can actually function on a day-to-day basis. So it is confirmed at this point in time that Vegapunk's 1 through 6 are clones. Each one embodies one of the Vegapunk facets, like most of us have already thought. And the idea is that there are 6 Vegapunks, therefore they can do 6 times the work. We don't know yet when they were created, if let's say they start off in these current body stages, or if they start off as infants, and if they have or not the same life expectancy as a regular person. At this point in time, we're not too sure on those details. Because keep in mind here that the German soldiers, at least as far as we know, they do have their ages accelerated to where in 5 years, they can grow up to be a 20-year-old individual. Now, whether or not they can live normal lives from that point on, it's unclear. But there is a chance here where life expectancy for clones is shortened. What we do know now is that each one of these clones is linked to Punk records, just like Dr. Vegapunk. And even though we're not too sure if Vegapunk himself, the stellar body, can, let's say, eat and defecate and sleep through York, this probably explains how the other ones can have those sort of physical links so they can keep on doing what they're doing, their research, their construction, and so on and so forth, while York takes care of the other bodily functions. It's very likely that they have their own brains and they can function without the need of Punk records, let's say if Vegapunk and or Punk records were to be destroyed, which is why Kaku states in 1062 that they had to eliminate all of the Vegapunks, not just one, all of them have to go. After that, we do find out that the Beam Saber apparently has its key flaw of attracting a whole mess of bugs, which of course Bonnie, sad for her, but there is something here with Bonnie and Vegapunk that even Vegapunk has to admit that he feels bad for her because of what happened with Kuma, but those full details we don't know just yet. But then Vegapunk confirms the Momonosuke dragon ability. He actually states that it took him 20 years to actually make the devil fruit that Momonosuke ate. Then what is the deal with the Seraphim Jinbei being able to dive into land itself with abilities that seem to mimic the swim fruit? Since it takes 20 years to make a replica of the Kaido ability, there's a good chance here that he couldn't replicate Senior Pink's ability when he was, let's say, in prison by Fujitora and the Marines after Dressrosa. So that actually kind of leans towards the idea that Senior Pink is dead and Seraphim Jinbei ate that fruit. Of course, that'd be too sad. So we have to lean heavily now towards the idea that Seraphim Jinbei is utilizing tech in order to actually swim and bend matter as if it were water. It could be the case here where, let's say, it is a modified fruit of Senior Pink's fruit, but let's say for whatever reason, it was much quicker than Kaido's fruit. Or it's the fast food version of the fruit and it's really, really low on nutrients. Meaning Jinbei Seraphim can really only do a fraction of what the actual swim fruit itself could do. But after that, giant robot time. Wow, a robot that actually tried to invade the Holy Land 200 years ago, and it is confirmed to be created around 900 years ago. So this right here is a new added piece of lore that right now, I'll be honest with you, right now, I got virtually nothing. I can theory craft and so on and so forth, but there's really not that much I can really say on this giant robot. It seems to be like outside of what Robin said about the Fishman rights being pushed at that point in time. There's really not much about 200 years ago. 400 years ago is like Ryoma stuff in Wano Country. 300 years ago is German Kingdom stuff in all the North Blue. Like there was some sort of failure that they suffered at that point in time. But then 200 years ago is this relatively new in terms of, let's say, lore focus. And it kind of feels like in some way this also involved the giants, since we know that giants even live past that, because the elder giants that we see in the Big Mom flashback, Fallbeard and Mountbeard, they're older than 340 years. So this one is a bit of a mystery, and then I will at some point in time have to take more time to do the research, theory craft, and so on and so forth. But what is important here is that this thing did attack the Holy Land. However, it ran out of power. And then we find out from Shaka that this power source is what even Vegapunk lacks today. So this is probably another play on the idea of this undying flame that was mentioned by Lilith in chapter 1065. And this also happens to be the same chapter where this Iron Giant machine was introduced. At the end of the chapter, Iron Giant. At the beginning of the chapter, Undying Flame. And the Undying Flame with that power, in theory, making your own sun is possible. Whoa, that's big time stuff. And then in this chapter, well, this thing ran out of power. What's that power? Potentially this Undying Flame. There's a good chance that this thing had power stored in it for 700 years and was still able to almost attack the Holy Land for whatever reason, with whatever trigger, because of the power stored in it by this Undying Flame. So it is kind of crazy because in the near future, later this week, I have a video talking about the moon I want to drop. And one of the key things about this theory is the Undying Flame stuff. Yes, the Undying Flame. So be on the lookout later this week for that Moon 3 video, because the Undying Flame could, well, watch that video without a doubt. After all of that, we find out that Vegapunk wants to leave Egghead Island. So it feels like even though his brain is in Punk Records, if he leaves, you can still maintain contact with Punk Records, no problem. And no matter where they are in the world, maybe even off world, right? They could still gain access to Punk Records. And at the same time, we see Rob Gucci and CP0. Now, the last time we saw their boat, they were in the New World waters and it wasn't snowing where they were at. So I kind of thought that it would take them a lot more time to get to Egghead Island, since it took Luffy and company a few days from Wano Country going straight down south to get to Egghead Island. But that being said, here they are. And we actually see the updated design of the Seraphim Kuma, where we do see the white hair, where last time it was black hair, and to confirm that that was a mistake. And in the process, we do see one of the CBs go down. The best pick is Rob Gucci. Rob Gucci did something, the CBs goes graw, and then as it goes down, he says, what badly trained pets, but it is a testament to someone's power, whether it's them as a collective or it's an individual. And of course, the Straw Hats, they all know the name Rob Lucci. However, Shaka, prepare for battle. Do not allow Rob Gucci and company to pull up. And this also probably coincides with what he told Dragon, where he told Dragon, I may die soon. Because maybe somehow, some way, Vegapunk, at least Shaka, knew that CP0 would be coming after him. And it could also be the reason why Vegapunk wants to leave the island to avoid Cypher Pull. And even though we are a government-backed facility, we also don't want to die. And then finally, Bartholomew Kuma, running and sprinting and trying to go somewhere despite his body breaking down. Even his kneecaps literally, like someone crossed him up so bad, he blew out a kneecap. So Kuma's not in good shape. Not in good shape, but Dragon and Ivankov want to know the deal. What's going on, Kuma? And this could be relative to, again, CP0. Because the idea that I've heard is that the Seraphim Kuma may have some sort of link with the genuine article Kuma. Kuma can hear Rob Lucci talking about Julie Bonnie, that they were, quote, finished with her, end quote. And so if they see her, they will finish her off for good. So this probably relates the Holy Land, Mary Jo's Pub, the Rev versus the Admirals, and so on and so forth. And it appears that in the mix of the Rev against the Admirals trying to save Kuma, Julie Bonnie was in that mix, and Cypher Pull, CP0 were also in that mix. So this clearly needs a much more in-depth flashback as to what exactly happened on the Holy Land. And that is it for the story progression of this chapter. So, overall final thoughts. This chapter, it is lore rich. The story, clearly, the story progression components of this chapter are very strong. Very, very strong. Especially when it comes to 200-year timeline, where that timeline is not necessarily talked about that much, 200 years in the past. So Oda is going lore rich, which I love to see. When it comes to character components, good stuff with Vegapunk for damn sure. And the pace was okay. But personally speaking, in my personal opinion, this chapter is a better chapter than the last chapter. This chapter is a 7.5 to like 8. Like actual great chapter of One Piece, because again, the world building is blooming in a very, very good way. And of course, character stuff for Vegapunk is extraordinarily important because Vegapunk is arguably one of the most important figures in the world of One Piece, even in Endgame, if they don't die. So once again, 8/10 chapter. I like it a lot. I'm gonna see you guys on the flip side.